Hello and welcome. South Africa is known as the Rainbow Nation, as it's made up of so many races, cultures and religions. Now, over the last 13 years, it's gone from a system under racial segregation to full democracy. So what lessons does South Africa's transition have for countries around the world looking to go for integration and multiculturalism? During this special segment from Capetown, South Africa, we speak with the Premier of Western Cape Province, Ebrahim Rasool. A long-time ANC activist, Premier Rasool served time in prison for his anti-apartheid activities. And as a Muslim in the government of President Thabo Mbeki, he's become one of the leading voices for multiculturalism and integration in South Africa today. Premier, it's good to speak with you.
No, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to speak to Rizkan.
Thank you, sir. Well, let me start by asking you where you see the last 13 or so years have gone since the elections. Has it reached the kind of integration and harmony that you might have expected?
Look, I think it's impossible to overturn a 300-year situation in 13 years. But I think that we know we're alive in South Africa, and we know we're on the right path because we're struggling with things that others tend to deny, sweep under the carpet, or suppress. And I think that for us, the fact that you can have your newspapers and your television stations and your radio stations buzzing with what it means to be integrated, what is non-racialism, how do people live together, can people coexist, what is multiculturalism, can you carry more identities, I think that that says that there is a level of debate in South Africa that is healthy, that is fulfilling, and ultimately, I think, leading to the kind of perfection that we envisage.
And there are many countries around the world that say they are good models for racial and religious integration. Malaysia says, look, we're a model Muslim state, for example. Turkey says we're a perfect example of a secular state. What does South Africa represent?
I think that what South Africa represents is a country that had a moment of rupture. We don't have inherited traditions that go back 500 years. We don't have cultural traditions that go back 500 years, and we don't have a set of norms and values that are predated to this. 13 years ago, we had a rupture in which we said that what has gone before may not all be wrong, but was fundamentally wrong. And let's examine it, let's scrutinize it, and in scrutinizing it, let's see what we can do better. We had the opportunity to do something better, to reinvent ourselves, and to reshape the relationships between different people, different religious groups, cultural groups, racial groups, language groups. And I think we've come up with something unique in South Africa that comes from that moment of rupture.
And considering how harsh the regime was, though, the apartheid regime, how can you expect, or how can you advise the people of South Africa to shed the baggage that they carried from that time?
I think that because the regime was so harsh before, anything that we do is better than before. And so we always live with a gratitude and appreciation that the difficulties we face today are infinitely better than the difficulties we faced yesterday. That everything we face is surmountable. And so there's a can-do spirit in South Africa because we have, in a sense, seen our death to appreciate the kind of life of struggle, of debate, of choice and scrutiny that I think we're going through now. And so the temptation may be there to carry a lot of the baggage of the past, the hatreds of the past, but even for that, we have said that we have not fought other people, we have fought an evil system. We have not fought other races, we have fought for non-racialism. We have not fought other cultures, we have fought for multiculturalism. And so I think we were always conscious of what we stand for, rather than what we stand against. And I think that the world has not understood all of this and have simply labeled it all a miracle. It's not a miracle, it's hard-won concepts that I think that we've unearthed in South Africa.
When I talk to people here in South Africa, one of the key concerns, beyond crime and other social issues that affect other places, is the issue of poverty. Now, how can people focus on integration and moving forward in harmony when the prime concern is the poverty?
You see, poverty is an enormous problem in South Africa. There are far too many people going hungry, far too many people unemployed, far too many people feeling insecure in their own homes. And so we would be the first ones to admit that we have a problem of poverty in this country. What I think we can live with is the fact that it is not necessarily done because you are of a race. You are not poor simply because the government is doing it to you, because you belong to another language group or a religious group or whatever. So I think we all understand that it is predisposed, this poverty, because it comes from the apartheid system. But I think that we have shed the notion of victimhood. And I think that what South Africans are doing are saying, let's be the masters of our own destiny. Let's be the agents for change. And so even for the poorest of the poor, they never go through life without any dignity. And I think that poverty without dignity is really a depressing thing. But poverty with dignity is always circumscribed by hope. And I think that that's the difference between what we do now and what happened before.
What's interesting is talking to people, it seems that religion and religious divides don't appear here in South Africa quite the same way that you might hear of them in other places. And I know as a Muslim and a leading Muslim voice in this country, it must be interesting to get your perspective on how the religion, Islam, is regarded when you hear it in the news in other parts of the world, certainly viewed with suspicion.
I think I tend to be a little bit of a phenomenon in the world because people can't understand. How can you be 90% non-Muslim, 95% non-Muslim in South Africa, and yet a Muslim, a fairly conscientious Muslim, becomes the premier of one of the most beautiful provinces in South Africa? People can't understand it. The fact of the matter is that I don't believe that the majority of Muslims walk around in South Africa with issues. I think that they are far more comfortable with their neighbors. But the key lesson is that we have learned in South Africa, not only as Muslims, but as all communities, that you can have many identities coexisting at the same time. Meaning that you are not a Muslim first and last. You're a Muslim, but you can be a South African Muslim. You can even be a South African Muslim of Malay or Indian origin. So you carry all of these identities. Identities which define who you are, but identities which at the same time connect you with others. And so the whole is always there, but the part is also always revered. And I think that that's the balance that we find. I think the South African Bill of Rights says all the religions are equal. We don't have an obsession with numbers, how many Muslims and how many Christians, to decide whether all the religions must be equal. It is the equal value of God. It's the equal value of the values that you stand for. We don't have issues around freedom of association and belief. The only thing that we proscribe would be hate speech. And if we all stay within the borders of hate speech, we can all coexist wonderfully. And that, I think, is a lesson that South Africa has to offer to the world.
But South Africans do listen to the news from outside. They're very interested in what's going on around the world. And I wonder how much some of that suspicion and some of the negativity that certainly has seeped into the media, certainly the Western media to some degree, about Islam, has reached the South African ears.
I think that South Africans are acutely aware of what's happening in Iraq. They are passionate about a resolution for Palestine. They are sympathetic to the struggle against Islamophobia in the West. And we are more sympathetic and passionate about those things because we understand it intensely. Islam was a banned religion in South Africa until about 200 years ago. We understand what stereotyping is. We understand what discrimination and profiling is. And that is why we can identify. And that is why we say we never want that ever to be in South Africa again, and we wouldn't want it anywhere in the world. And hence, people like myself and others are going out in the world speaking against it. We speak against it not only because we have an issue with President Bush or then Prime Minister Blair. We speak about it also because we understand that it requires introspection for the Muslim community themselves. You cannot be comfortable with the world if you're not comfortable with yourself. You cannot externalize or outsource your problem to Bush when you have problems within yourself. If the mainstream does not assert itself within the Muslim community and it allows the fringes to define Islam and who Muslims are, then I think you have problems. So I think it's a balanced solution that we would proffer.
So tell me about this, your activities, speaking outside on the issue of integration, the idea of moving beyond extremism.
You see, people who respond on the terms of the aggressor often think that they must fight extremism with a counter-extremism. At the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game. Everything in Islam is defined by a central objective of peace and of balance. The word Islam comes from peace. The mission of the Prophet is to be a mercy unto all. The definition of the Ummah, of the Muslim community, is one of being the middle path. Now, if that is what Islam is all about, you cannot fight extremism with extremism. You've got to be able to rise above it. You've got to be your own agent. You cannot be the reagent. And I think that that's the difference. That's what we've been taught in the struggle. We could afford whites as blacks. We could afford discrimination with counter-discrimination. We chose not to because we had wise ANC leaders who warned against it, who always cherished humanism. And I think it's that humanism that we would advise the Muslim world to rediscover amongst themselves in order to respond better to what is happening in Iraq, in Palestine, and in the West, where Islamophobia is prevalent.
Well, it's great to hear the Muslim voice coming out of South Africa and from experience, and the experience you've just described, giving examples of how it's possible to move on, as you say. Where are you finding your support from around the world? Where are you hearing strong, moderate Muslim voices who can back what you say, support what you say, and give extra weight to your argument?
I think part of the issue is not to define it as moderate, because I think that it reaches levels of discreditation, because that's what our enemies would like to say. We don't want to deal with those extremists, we want to deal with the moderates. I think we're looking for the authentic, balanced voice within Islam. We've not got to cede that middle ground. Where people are coming from now is where they are in minorities. I think in Britain we're finding that Muslims don't want to be in a zero-sum game. I think in North America people are saying, let's get out of this. There must be, we don't have to knock our heads on the same wall all the time. Let's find a new way out of this. And I think that across Europe, Muslims are learning the art of realpolitik. The Muslim response to Sarkozy has been phenomenal. And Sarkozy's riposte to it has been unbelievable. And here we all thought that he was going to be the immoderate voice within France. And so the point that I'm making is that wherever people have knocked their heads against the same wall continuously, people are saying there must be a different way out. And that, I think, is where people like myself and many others must be able to show what is that way. What is this wasatiyah? What is this balanced middle ground that we need to present? It's in the absence of defining that balanced middle ground that I think Muslims experiment with the extremes. And I think there's a tiredness of polarization, a tiredness of the zero-sum game, a tiredness of violence defining us, a tiredness of anger being our property. And I think that people are looking for alternatives.
And you're finding sort of well-known voices who have this authentic voice of Islam, as you say?
I think that those voices have been there, but I think that they've often been browbeaten into silence. I think that there's a courage emerging, a courage to claim compromise not as a weakness, but as a strength. Peace not as a weakness, but as the defining feature of Islam. Moderation not as a weakness, but as the definition of the Ummah. And I think that that's what's beginning to emerge, a courage to define all of those things, and hopefully a clarity to put it in such a way that it is a magnet to the entire Muslim community, but more than that, to the entire world community, to occupy the middle ground.
So tell me about what's happening here in Cape Town, the Western Cape province, in terms of integration, how you're using your voice, and certainly this idea of perspective of Muslim integration to build the future here.
We've set a vision for the Western Cape as a home for all. And I think that in that notion of the Western Cape being a home for all, we are saying it's not one yet, but it must become one. We are inviting you to struggle and debate, to find your place within this Western Cape. We have enormous natural beauty, but great inequality. The inequality is between rich and poor, between black and white. And I think that what we are saying is, let us give each one their place in the sun. We are struggling actively to find the balance between unity and diversity. Too much unity is a melting pot of uniformity. Too much diversity means that there is no binding center that holds everyone together. And I think we are busy with that struggle to find the right tipping point between unity and diversity. Now that That, I think, is what makes us know that we're alive, because we're dealing with these things explicitly rather than in corners hidden away from full view.
Well, Premier, let's look into your looking glass, your crystal. 10 years down the road, what could we see different here in Cape Town, for example?
If I have my way, I would want Cape Town to be the multicultural hub in the world. I would want Cape Town to be the creative capital of the world, because we have created space for different cultures, different languages, different ethnicities to collide here creatively and to synthesize something far better. I'd want at the hand of that for the squatter camps to be eliminated with the energy and the wealth that is loosened up. I'd want poverty to be pushed back a lot faster, because we have invited the best brains, the best talent, and the best wealth from all over the world to come and develop us. And I do that confidently because I know that the world is looking for centers of multiculturalism to affirm that different people can live together and coexist, that multiculturalism can work, and that non-racialism is possible, that the world for all is indeed possible.
Does Cape Town, does the Western Cape province have the capacity, the capability, self-sustained capability to achieve that, or does it need outside help?
I think that the Western Cape needs outside help. And I think that it is gratifying that a lot of that outside help is coming from the traditional heartlands of Islam even, that they are recognizing that here is a difference to the zero-sum game, and they're investing here to try and make it a multicultural. But I think at the same time, it's always been the meeting point between East and West. It's always been the meeting point of what is traditionally African and what is cosmopolitan in the world. And I think that people are investing, maybe not fast enough, and so the invitation must go out. Let's do it more, and let's do it faster.
Well, Premier Ebrahim Rasool, thank you very much for talking with us. Good luck with that.
So thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you, sir. And that's it for this report. Don't forget, if you have any ideas that you'd like us to feature on the show, just send us an email to riz@aljazeera.net. We'll see you next time. Street Talk's coming up next.